It began with a letter. No one knew then that a single envelope would become the calling card of one of the most elusive killers in American history. It was August 1, 1969, when the San Francisco Chronicle received a strange handwritten message. It started like a confession and ended like a challenge. Inside was a cipher, symbols, numbers, and letters arranged in a pattern no one could immediately understand. The writer called himself the Zodiac. Within days, 2 other newspapers received nearly identical letters, each containing a piece of a cryptic code that the killer claimed would reveal his identity. The only problem, no one could solve it. The Zodiac wasn't just a murderer. He was a showman of terror, a man obsessed with control, playing an entire city like a puppet. His crimes began months earlier, in December 1968, when high school students Betty Lou Jensen and David Faraday were shot dead on a quiet lover's lane in Benicia, California. It seemed like a senseless act of violence. But when Darlene Ferrin and Mike Mago were attacked just 7 months later, the connection became impossible to ignore. Both shootings happened in isolated areas. Both involved couples. And both were followed by taunting letters to the press. This is the Zodiac speaking. Those words sent a chill through California and soon, through the world. The killer seemed to know everything, details only the police could have known. He described the victims, the weapons, even the exact sequence of the crimes. But then he did something no one expected. He started writing about it as if it were a game. In one letter, he bragged, "I like killing people because it's so much fun." He said humans were the most dangerous animal of all. His words carried the tone of someone who didn't just kill to hide but killed to be seen. Reporters and investigators were caught between fear and fascination. The cipher he sent, the now infamous 408 symbol code, became an obsession for cryptologists, military code breakers, and amateur puzzle solvers across the country. Eventually, a school teacher named Donald Harden and his wife Betty cracked it. The message inside was horrifying and meaningless all at once. "I like killing people because it is so much fun. I will not give you my name because you will try to slow down or stop my collecting of slaves for the afterlife." There was no name. No signature beyond the circle with a cross through it, the symbol that would come to define him. But while the world stared at the paper, the Zodiac kept moving. Over the next 2 years, he struck again and again, each time leaving behind more questions than answers. On September 27, 1969, college students Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard were picnicking by Lake Berryessa when a man approached wearing a black executioner-style hood with the Zodiac symbol drawn across his chest. He tied them up, stabbed them repeatedly, then calmly walked away. Cecilia died 2 days later. Hartnell survived to describe every chilling detail. Less than 2 weeks later, the Zodiac attacked again in San Francisco, shooting cab driver Paul Stein in the head before wiping the car with a rag and walking away. Witnesses saw him, calm, deliberate, unhurried. When police arrived, they were seconds too late. The killer had vanished into the night. Within days, another letter arrived at the Chronicle. Enclosed was a piece of Stein's bloody shirt. It was his proof. His way of saying, "I am real, and I am watching you." What made the Zodiac so terrifying wasn't just the violence, it was his reach. He invaded living rooms through headlines, whispered through radios, and printed his words for millions to read. He wasn't hiding from the media. He was feeding off it. He wrote about collecting slaves, shooting the tire of a school bus, and picking off the little darlings as they came bouncing out. Parents kept their children home. Police patrolled school routes. San Francisco had never been more afraid. Yet no one could catch him. He changed weapons, locations, and even handwriting. His letters became taunts. He ridiculed investigators, mocked the police, and gave himself a body count. Then, as suddenly as he appeared, he started to fade. His last confirmed letter arrived in 1974. He claimed 37 victims, though only 7 could ever be tied to him. The cryptic messages stopped, but the legend only grew stronger. Who was the Zodiac? Police had suspects. Arthur Lee Allen, a school teacher with a dark past, was the most famous. His home contained disturbing clues, including a wristwatch engraved with the Zodiac symbol. But DNA, fingerprints, and handwriting never gave a definitive match. Others believed the killer was someone else entirely, a military code breaker, a journalist, even a law enforcement officer hiding in plain sight. Decades later, new technology offered new hope. Partial DNA was extracted from stamps and envelopes, but contamination made results unreliable. In 2020, one of his unsolved ciphers, the 340-character code, was finally cracked by a team of international cryptologists. The message was once again strange, arrogant, and empty of identity. "I hope you are having lots of fun trying to catch me," it read. "That wasn't me on the TV show. I am not afraid of the gas chamber." Even after half a century, the Zodiac's voice reached across time, still mocking, still cold. He had written himself into history not as a person, but as an idea, a ghost hidden behind ink and fear. Today, the Zodiac Killer remains one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in American crime. Every few years, new suspects emerge, new evidence is claimed, new theories rise and fall. But the man behind the cryptic letters, the one who turned murder into a puzzle, has never been unmasked. And maybe that's what he wanted all along, to become eternal not through his crimes, but through the questions he left behind. Because in the end, the Zodiac didn't just kill his victims. He captured a nation's fear, and never let it go. He was more than just a killer, he was an enigma, an intelligence that thrived on chaos, a mind that found pleasure in confusion. Each letter he sent wasn't only a confession but also a performance, designed to make the police, the press, and the public dance to his tune. The Zodiac Killer created a mythology around himself, a persona larger than life, wrapped in ciphers, symbols, and riddles that made him untouchable. Detectives worked day and night, combing through thousands of leads. Witnesses came forward with conflicting stories. Some described him as heavyset, with glasses and a flat, emotionless voice. Others swore he was slim and athletic. There was no consistent face, no consistent identity, only the lingering voice that kept saying, "This is the Zodiac speaking." The investigation stretched across multiple counties, creating friction between police departments that refused to share information. It was the perfect storm for a criminal who thrived on misdirection. While officers in Vallejo chased one lead, San Francisco detectives pursued another, and by the time they compared notes, the Zodiac was already gone. The killer's letters continued to taunt the authorities. He claimed to have planted bombs, sent maps marked with strange crosshairs, and demanded that people wear buttons displaying his symbol. He wanted to be seen, recognized, feared. The more attention he got, the bolder his words became. He sent greeting cards covered in blood-stained threats, notes with astrological symbols, and cryptograms that seemed unsolvable. Every time the press published his letters, it felt like giving him exactly what he wanted: a platform, a spotlight, a way to keep his legend alive. But beyond the terror, there was something else, an intricate pattern that few noticed. The timing of the letters, the choice of words, even the paper itself. Some experts believe the Zodiac was a man with military experience. His precision, his knowledge of codes, and his ability to vanish without trace all pointed to someone who had been trained to operate in secrecy. Others thought he was simply a narcissist with above-average intelligence, obsessed with proving he was smarter than everyone else. In 1970, police released a composite sketch that became one of the most iconic images in true crime history: the bespectacled man with the calm face and the dead eyes. It was haunting because it looked ordinary, like someone you'd pass on the street. That was the Zodiac's greatest weapon: he blended in. As years passed, frustration grew. Detectives aged, evidence degraded, and key witnesses died. The investigation shifted from active pursuit to historical obsession. Books, movies, and documentaries tried to solve what decades of police work couldn't. Yet with every theory came more uncertainty. Arthur Lee Allen remained the prime suspect for years. His handwriting was close but not perfect. His DNA didn't match, but the evidence was old, the samples compromised. When Allen died in 1992, many believed the case died with him. But others refused to let go. They saw patterns in the letters that suggested multiple writers or even an accomplice. Some thought the Zodiac was part of a group, others believed it was all the work of a single mind too clever for the system to catch. Technology gave new life to the mystery. In recent years, amateur sleuths used social media, machine learning, and DNA databases to re-examine old clues. A group known as the Casebreakers claimed to have identified a man named Gary Francis Post as the Zodiac based on facial scars, military background, and cryptic hints in his writings. The claim made headlines, but police have never confirmed it. The evidence remains circumstantial, the truth still buried beneath decades of speculation. What continues to disturb people is how personal the Zodiac made everything. He wasn't killing for money or revenge. He was killing for meaning, for control over fear itself. He used letters as weapons and turned puzzles into psychological warfare. Even those who never saw his face still felt his presence, as if he had reached into the collective mind of a generation and written his name there in invisible ink. And in a way, that's what made him unstoppable. Because when a killer becomes an idea, you can't arrest him. You can't put an idea behind bars. It lingers, echoes, evolves. The Zodiac Killer didn't just create a mystery, he created a myth. A myth that refuses to fade, even 50 years later. Even now, decades later, the shadow of the Zodiac still hangs over California like an unfinished story. Every few years, someone claims to have found a new clue, a new cipher, a new lead that could finally reveal his identity. But the truth always seems to slip away, just beyond reach, as if the killer himself designed it that way. Some say he's long dead, buried with his secrets. Others believe he lived an ordinary life, blending into the background while the world searched for a ghost. The Zodiac was obsessed with immortality. He didn't want to be forgotten, and in that sense, he succeeded. His letters outlived his victims, his words outlived the investigation, and his mystery outlived time itself. Each new generation that discovers his story feels the same chill that swept through California in 1969, the feeling that someone was watching, calculating, and always one step ahead. What truly haunts investigators is the possibility that the Zodiac could have been caught. Mistakes were made. Inconsistent communication between departments meant crucial details were missed. Fingerprint records were smudged. Evidence was misplaced. In an age before modern forensics and DNA databases, even small errors meant big consequences. The Zodiac thrived in that chaos. He wasn't just lucky, he understood the system's weaknesses and used them to his advantage. He was organized but unpredictable, intelligent but cruel. His crimes had no clear pattern except one: control. Every letter he sent was about power, power over the police, over the press, over the public sphere. He wanted to remind everyone that he existed, even when he wasn't killing. By the mid-1970s, the letters stopped. No new murders could be confirmed as his. The trail went cold. Some detectives believed he was imprisoned for another crime. Others thought he had died or simply grown bored. But the mystery refused to rest. In the decades that followed, investigators returned to the case with new tools. Handwriting analysts, forensic psychologists, cryptographers, all tried to decode the man behind the mask. Each clue seemed to lead in circles. His ciphers, his symbols, even his language, all pointed to intelligence and madness intertwined. He wrote as if the murders were only part of a grander plan, a story he alone understood. And maybe that's why no one has ever solved it. For the families of the victims, the Zodiac story isn't just a legend, it's a wound that never healed. They still remember the fear, the uncertainty, the endless waiting for justice that never came. Their pain is what grounds this story in reality. Behind the ciphers and the headlines were real lives, real people whose futures were stolen for a game no one agreed to play. The tragedy is that while the Zodiac achieved his goal of being remembered, his victims were nearly forgotten. In the end, what remains is a haunting reminder of how evil can disguise itself behind intelligence, how one person can manipulate an entire society's fear with nothing more than a pen and a symbol. The Zodiac Killer turned communication into a weapon, and in doing so, created one of the most enduring mysteries in crime history. Even now, when people decode his letters or trace his crimes on digital maps, it feels like he's still out there somewhere, smirking in the shadows, knowing he's still winning the game he started half a century ago. The Zodiac Killer may have vanished from the streets, but his presence endures in every unsolved file, every cryptic message, every whisper that asks, who was he? Maybe we'll never know. Maybe the truth is too deeply buried in time, too tangled in lies and obsession to ever be untangled. Or maybe he's still among us, not as a man, but as a story that refuses to end. Because some mysteries aren't meant to be solved. Some are meant to haunt us forever. There's something unsettling about how the Zodiac's mystery refuses to die. Long after the murders stopped, the fear continued to echo. People who lived through that era still remember the sound of a phone ringing late at night, the unease of driving down empty highways, the nervous glance over a shoulder when walking alone. The Zodiac wasn't just a killer, he became a reflection of society's darkest fear, that evil could be intelligent, invisible, and patient. He knew exactly how to keep his legend alive. By never revealing his true identity, he made sure the story would never end. Every theory, every book, every documentary became another chapter in the myth he built. He knew that as long as people kept searching, his name would live forever. And in that sense, he succeeded more than any serial killer in history. Over the years, the investigation took on a life of its own. Generations of detectives, journalists, and online sleuths devoted their lives to decoding what he left behind. Some found patterns in his letters that seemed to hint at a hidden message. Others analyzed his handwriting, convinced it revealed his personality, methodical, narcissistic, obsessive. Still, every clue seemed to lead to another dead end. For every suspect that appeared to fit, there was always something that didn't. DNA ruled out some, lack of evidence disqualified others. The truth remained locked away behind the same symbols that first appeared in those letters. What makes the Zodiac case different from others is not just the brutality, but the intellect behind it. He wasn't content with killing, he wanted recognition. He wanted to be seen as untouchable, as someone smarter than the system designed to stop him. And in a twisted way, he achieved that. He controlled his own narrative. Every police statement, every newspaper article, every public panic, it all played into his design. He had turned an entire state into his stage. Yet beneath the horror, there's a strange kind of silence that surrounds the Zodiac now. As time moves forward and the people who lived those moments begin to fade, the fear has shifted into fascination. What once terrified the public has become one of the greatest unsolved puzzles in history. His ciphers are studied in classrooms, his crimes dissected in documentaries, his identity debated endlessly online. The Zodiac has become both a ghost and a riddle, a figure too monstrous to forget and too mysterious to ever fully understand. Maybe that's why his case continues to draw us in. Deep down, we all want closure. We want to know who he was, why he did it, what drove him to toy with human life as if it were a game. But the Zodiac's greatest trick was convincing us that we could find those answers. He knew we'd keep searching, keep questioning, keep trying to decode what was never meant to be solved. Perhaps the truth is simpler and darker than anyone wants to admit. Maybe the Zodiac wasn't some criminal mastermind or genius codebreaker. Maybe he was just a man who discovered that fear could make him immortal. That as long as people whispered his name, he would never truly die. And so, the letters remain. The codes remain. The mystery remains. Every envelope, every symbol, every unsolved cipher is a piece of a ghost that still lingers in the collective memory of a nation. The Zodiac Killer may have stopped writing, but his silence speaks louder than any confession ever could. Somewhere, out there in the fog of history, his secrets are still hidden, waiting for someone to find them. Or perhaps he already told us everything, hidden in plain sight, laughing as we search for a truth that was never meant to be found. Because some stories don't end. They just fade into the shadows, leaving us forever wondering who was behind the cryptic letters, and why he chose to never let us know.